Kathleen, I've already done the introduction for you before this, but it's so wonderful to have you here today.
Thanks for
And
having me.
and I found you on TikTok as the white lady and her experience at an HBCU that was so relevant and so relatable that I just immediately reached out to say, I would never have occurred to me, and I was a late in life student getting my degrees, never would have occurred to me to even apply at an HBCU. So I have to know, and our listeners have to know, what made you do that?
Well, so I'm in the middle of a career change. I'm getting a master's in social work now, but I already have a master's in English, and so I've taught English before. And a big issue that I encountered in my education was both my undergrad. I went to a small liberal arts college, and then I went to a big SEC school for grad school. And in both of those schools, I only had one Black professor. And I was thinking about the kinds of things I want to accomplish in social work. And, one of those is racial equity and advocating for other people. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be the best social worker I can be if I attend another school where I'm only hearing from other white people. And I thought, I know the kinds of things that a classroom full of white people are going to say in conversation. And I know the way that most white middle class people were raised. So I was looking for a diverse faculty specifically, and it's hard to find at most places. And so there's a historically Black university right near me. It's actually got a great program. It's very affordable. And so I kept looking at their webpage and being like, would I be intruding on a safe space for Black people here? Like, is it okay for me to apply? You know? And so I kept thinking about it. And then they kept extending the application deadline this year. And, when they extended it from May to June, I thought, well, maybe I could apply. And then it went to July 1st, and I thought, okay, if they extend it one more time, then I'm gonna apply. And they extended it to July 15th. And so I thought, okay, everybody whose dream it is to attend here has already applied. Everybody who is looking for that safe space, they've already been accepted, So I thought, okay, if I'm meant to be there, then I'll get in. And so I applied and started school a month later.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. And so, what was your expectation, and what was your first blush of, oh, I'm not received the same?
Yeah. Okay.
First
So
thing. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's the first TikTok that you commented on of mine, where I had this realization because in the first couple of weeks of class, I had more than one professor respond to me in a way that really surprised me, like as if I was being rude to them or um, had misbehaved in some way. It really threw me off because I thought, well, what's her problem? And then I realized, oh, I'm talking to these people like we're peers, like we're equals, because I'm an adult, they're an adult. Um, and I realized, oh, I need to be deferring to their authority more. I need to be saying yes, ma'am. And once I switched there, all of a sudden I was received so much better. And I realized that I was assuming that everybody was going to receive me in the same way that I'm received in the white middle class spaces that I'm in most of the time, which is I'm 35, I'm a mom. So people generally assume that I'm a safe space. If a little kid is lost in the grocery store, they come ask me to help find their mom. If a man's lost in the purse aisle at TJ Maxx, he asked me which one his wife would like better. Um, and and so I just assumed that at my new school, like I knew I wouldn't fit in right away because I'm an older student, I'm white, and but I assumed that everyone would know that my intentions were good being here, that I was a good, nice, safe person, and that I wasn't a threat. And I realized that was not necessarily the case, that for a lot of my Black classmates and the Black professors, they haven't had these nice positive experiences with the nice white mom in the grocery store or whatever. So that was a surprise.
It reminded me of a story that Oprah tells about shopping and not being recognized, but being treated as though she were there to steal and being watched rather than that whole experience and having the privilege that white women don't even recognize as privilege is
Right.
what I found the most fascinating about your lived experience. We can read all the books and go to all the book studies and think we're woke as hell, and then find out that we are surrounded by people who assume good intent about us, who give
Hmm.
us benefit of the doubt, and undeservedly so.
Right. That's one of the things I said was when I walk into a store, it's assumed that I'm there to buy something and that I'm a good customer. I'll see a shopkeeper clock my shoes and my purse and my jewelry, and then all of a sudden they're so nice to me. And I didn't understand how much confidence being treated like that everywhere was giving me. And so I've had to readjust how I think because I was assuming everybody clocked me the same way. That's not the case.
And what I love about TikTok and your presence on TikTok is I've been seeing you evolve in real time. And you don't get that everywhere on social media or
So,
in
and
the
that's
book.
right. And that's why I've been sharing because most of my comments are really positive, but then there's always somebody who's like, well, duh, or this is the most obvious thing ever. And I'm like, but that's why I'm sharing is that, like you're saying, I'm a white person who's really tried to be woke. I've read the books. I'm trying my best, and I still am so clueless. And something I keep saying is I'll never understand the Black experience, and that's not the goal. And I'm not on TikTok to educate Black people about racism. They'll always know more than we do. But I'm there to talk to other white women who are just moving through the world in blissful ignorance. And so I hope that sharing can help people.
So let's see if we can dive just a little bit deeper, because one of the things that I saw happen in this election cycle is that when white women did not step up in the numbers required to
Mm-hmm.
make the shift, and 85% of Black women did,
Mm-hmm.
the Black creators took a big step back and left us to our own FAFO experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of indignant white comments that came through, but I'm one of the good ones. That's how the blue bracelet thing started. How do I prove to you that I'm an ally
Mm-hmm.
who happened to not vote the right way, or that I'm not one of the ones who voted that way? Why do you suppose that we in our privileged positions can't extend grace to
Mm.
allow Black women to step back so we can learn our own lessons and build our own community and have our own pain?
I think I'm going to answer this question the long way around and talk about kind of how I understood racism as a kid growing up. And it was very much that it was not my problem, not that like I didn't have a dog in that fight kind of thing. Because my my family either were pretty recent immigrants or they were too poor to have enslaved people, too poor to have slaves. And so I thought like, yeah, we're the good ones. My people had no part of that. And even, on ancestry.com, I can see my great 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 granduncle's Civil War draft cards, and they fought for the Union. And so then I was like, whoa, yeah, we were good ones. And what I've come to realize is there's no amount of work that my ancestors could have done that would free me from complicity, because I'm always benefiting from those racist systems that hurt Black and brown people, and just by virtue of being white. And that doesn't mean, because then if I'm talking to a fellow white person who disagrees with me, this is where they say something like, "But I don't owe anybody anything."
Mhm.
Um, and to that, I would say, well, there you're not making up for anything specific that you did wrong, but don't we owe people who aren't in our privileged position, don't we owe them advocacy and support and affirmation and the gift of understanding, right? Um, so, but about specifically the Black creators taking a step back, I I kind of just wanted everybody to sit in the moment instead of like, no, don't wear a blue bracelet, just acknowledge and um it's like if you lose a loved one and somebody's like, well, they're in a better place. And you're like, no, that's wasn't helpful. I just want you to acknowledge that I'm really hurting. And I think it's kind of similar when we're talking about the grief of racial inequity and injustice.
Watching you on TikTok and watching your uncomfortability in real time. Let's talk about tennis shoes.
Oh, okay. So that's how I first got an audience on TikTok. I made a joke. I said, if you're a white person thinking about attending an HBCU, you have to go get new shoes. You're wearing the wrong sneakers, I promise. Or if you have good ones, they're dirty. Like, and I went on and on. And I was totally joking. And this is another situation where I just assumed everybody would receive me as joking. Some of the comments were really upset, saying that I was like making fun of an HBCU and saying people only cared about fashion. That wasn't my intention. I thought I was just making a joke about myself and my old, sad, dirty shoes. Um, so walking around the HBCU, I noticed that uh, all these college students have really cool shoes and they all look brand new. And then I'm interning at a mostly Black high school, and all of those kids have really nice shoes too. And I was wearing my Birkenstocks with my toes out, which my Gen Z neighbor tells me is not cool. You're supposed to cover up your toes now. Um, so I was going shopping and just made a joke on the internet, and people started being like, why are you there?" And I told them what I've told you, and it's been really really interesting because I've had a lot of comments from a lot of my followers are Black people in helping professions. They're counselors, teachers, and a lot of people have said, "Thanks, this will help me understand some of my clients." And I hope that I'm giving people a little window into how my mind has had to do these gymnastics to like reconfigure how I'm thinking about things and how I'm perceiving myself and other people, and hopefully bridge some little gaps. But yeah, I am very uncomfortable on there a lot. I'm all the time going like, if you don't like me, scroll on because
So you had one set episode where you talked about this particular instructor who you were misperceived by.
Mhm,
And that was before you learned the culture of respect that's
mhm,
required between students and professors at that institution.
mhm.
And I, then of course I go down the rabbit trail of all the comments and found her and her comment back to you, which I thought was really interesting because in the beginning you got a little side eye there. And for her to see and hear and acknowledge without changing the culture of their school for you, which we
Right.
are used to people doing because white women tears and white women discomfort makes people stop dead in their tracks, particularly
Mhm,
people of color.
mhm.
Tell me what you've learned about that.
Um, so like I said, since I already had a master's degree, I came in so confident that I understood how I should behave.
Mhm.
And my first degree, it was very much because a master's in English, if you're getting that, you're probably going to teach English, right? And so my professors were very focused on welcoming us into academia and being like, okay, now you're not an undergrad, you're one of us. You're assisting us. You need to take your academic authority, kind of thing. And so that's where, and many of them would be like, well, call me by my first name because you're on a different level now, kind of thing. And that's what I expected in this program. And so I'm in there speaking very casually, just like we're friends. And then all of a sudden, I'd get like a sarcastic response. Or on a Zoom call like this, I'd raise my hand and said, "Respectfully, sir." And he really snapped at me and said, could I please finish, Miss Kent?" And I was like, "Whoa, what's this guy's deal?" And then I understood that part of it is just this program is not the same as my other, but um, what I realized and what has been echoed in the comments is it, it, titles are very important to Black professionals because they've had to work harder to get there, and specifically coming from a white woman who, they're not sure if my casualness is friendliness or if it's disrespect intentionally.
Okay. Yeah. And so how do you navigate that? How long have you been there now?
Okay, so I finished my first semester, and I feel now that I've earned trust. I've made friends. I think the professors understand me, and it it only took me a couple classes to realize like I'm doing something wrong here. And I checked in with, because I had one professor that I immediately clicked with, and she went to a school that's very similar to the one I went to before. So I think that's probably why, like, she understood that I wasn't being disrespectful. And so I asked her for a meeting, and I just talked her through some of the interactions I had, and I just said like, I trust you and your feedback, and do you have any advice for me? And she was like, no, I think you're doing great and you're right on track. And um, but I that's what I would recommend to people, ask the people around you who you feel like you have a good relationship with. And probably that's not going to be a Black person at first. If you have some people who are really working on social justice issues, ask them, what do you think I need to do better? Where do you think I could improve? And if you're vulnerable and can listen and not be defensive, you'll learn a lot.
Right. Right. And the fact that you have immersed yourself in that culture so that you can be better at serving in social work speaks volumes to your courage of not knowing what you don't know, but
Right.
not being so afraid of being challenged
Mhm.
that you
And
wouldn't do that.
yeah, I think there's just a lot to be learned if you are able to let your guard down and be okay with being embarrassed.
Right.
Um, and I have learned a lot of just really small things. Like, for instance, I think before I had attended this school, if I was working with an older Black client, I would have thought that it would show them respect to treat them like an equal. Like, if they're in a vulnerable position and I'm the authority trying to provide them with resources, like, shouldn't we call each other by first names and be comfortable? No. Now I wouldn't do that with a client. I wouldn't assume. And I think it's better to err on the side of formality rather than to be perceived as disrespectful.
Mhm. I see. So remember when the bear, would you rather have a man or a bear, was
Oh,
going
yeah.
around?
And people
Okay.
said, I'd rather have the bear than the white woman.
Yes, particularly in a business setting.
Yeah.
And how many white women who felt perfectly justified with the bear and the man really got upset when it was turned on them because they're one of the good ones. We've got this whole cultural identity of being a savior of sorts,
Hmm.
yeah. And so how is that for you?
Um, hmm, yeah. So that was a moment where I was like, oh no, this is the perfect opportunity for us to be like, okay, I understand this now because this is an experience I can relate to. Because I'm married to a lovely man who I would be very safe in the woods with, but I still, for most men, the bear. And so, but it's so hard to put down that pride. And I've had several Black people in my comments ask things like, "Why don't y'all check each other? Why is it embarrassing to be called out for you?" And that was a surprising comment to me because I was like, "Well, of course it's embarrassing to be called out. Of course it's embarrassing to be wrong." But what I found is my Black classmates, there there's no hesitation in calling somebody out and saying that somebody's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or and that's why I had an interaction. I made a joke, and I don't want to say what it was because then people will defend me, but I made a joke in our group chat, and somebody privately messaged me and said like, hey, that made some people uncomfortable. And so, and I was like, oh, but I don't make people uncomfortable. That was my knee jerk reaction. Like, no, but it was just a joke. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, now I understand why, when I told my grandpa you can't say Negro anymore, he got so mad at me. And I thought, you didn't need to get mad. You just need to stop saying Negro. Um, and but it's a defensiveness, because it feels like, I think it feels like to white people, if we admit complicity, um, that's saying like, yes, I'm a racist. And it's not the same thing, because when we're thinking racist, we're thinking the Klansman with the rebel flag on his truck or something. And being complicit and acknowledging pain that we as a large group have caused is just taking accountability and not saying that you particularly have done anything wrong. And so I really appreciated this classmate messaging me, and I just took a breath and then just wrote in the group chat, "Hi, I'm sorry. That was a joke. It wasn't funny. I apologize. And if anybody wants to talk more about it, please, shoot me a message." And everybody was fine with that. And I really just appreciated that grace and generosity, because it's not kind to let somebody hurt your feelings. And so that's a thing I'll take from my classmates, is just being more direct with people, because they've helped me fit in better. I might have just kept making jokes that weren't being well received and never known.
Do you see any correlation between, for white women, the patriarchy and our perfectionistic drive of, never let him see you cry, never let him see you sweat? Um,
Hmm.
how and that intersection with racism?
Hmm. Yeah, I guess there is this a perception that showing vulnerability is showing weakness, and an opening for attack.
Right.
And that oh, my cat is back here.
Oh,
Uh that and I always used to perceive a critical comment as a negative comment. And then I had a therapist, Larry, who's an older man, and it was so sweet and just changed my life, really. But I was complaining to him about something my husband said, and he was like, "Oh, Kathleen, um, why did that hurt your feelings?" And I said, "Because it wasn't nice." And he said, "Well, was it true?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it's probably true, but he shouldn't have said something that wasn't nice." And Larry goes, "Well, Kathleen, who would you be open to hearing that criticism from besides your husband?" And I was like, "Well, nobody." And he said, "Well, why do you think your husband would say something critical to you?" "Well, maybe he wants me to do better." And Larry's like, "Well, what if you thought about it as helpful instead of mean?" And I was like, "Well, I would say maybe you're trying to hurt my feelings too, Larry." And um, but that conversation really changed how I think about things. And it's really not helpful to pretend like you're not sweating. It it gives people the wrong impression, and um, you can end up kind of out to sea by yourself without a help system. And I've shared this on TikTok too. My brother died by suicide in 2017, and since his death, I really dropped that pretending everything's perfect kind of facade, because I just thought, oh, it's not worth it. Life's too short, and I don't care what people think about me anymore. And that so totally changed the way people interact with me. Like, I realized that people were holding parts of themselves back, because many people believed this like perfect facade that I was putting up, even though it was just an act. And when I was vulnerable and talked about mental health and everything, all of a sudden people just opened up to me. And I found out people who I thought had never had a moment of trouble in their lives had been hospitalized, or really had these dark, sad situations. And so I just move through the world a lot differently now. And I think that's probably contributed to my whole decision to try to go somewhere where I'm surrounded by people with a different experience than me. Um, so back to patriarchy, racism. Um, yeah, I think that that drive to pretend to be perfect, it's held us back, And then it's made us want to pretend like everything's fine all the time. And a big part of that is saying like, oh, racism's not my problem. Oh, we're not racist anymore. We have a black president. Or I'm from the North, or I'm from California. I have a friend from California who said something like, so in high school, because I grew up in the South, she said in high school they just taught you that like slavery was great. And I was like, no, oh my goodness, no. And it was just interesting how even she had separated herself from the thinking that history was being taught so much differently where I was from. And um, uh, yeah, I hope that makes sense. I'm kind of
It does. Our audience, Kathleen, our target market here are white women over 40 who are
Mhm,
inclined to do the work to advance racial equity in our lifetime. But but they are inclined, but we are steeped in our normalcy, which is not
mhm,
normal for everybody, or even for us. I remember when I had my epiphany around the age of 40, that if I had all the energy that I had put into having the perfect body in my life, never good enough, no matter what, was never thin enough, never rich enough, never whatever. And I had thought if I had put all of the energy in that I had put into that into anything else, I could have changed humanity.
that's
And
really powerful.
yeah, yeah. And I became an intuitive eating consultant at that stage of life just to keep me accountable to stop the dieting stuff because it was so ingrained from my earliest memories and my generational feminine memories.
Mhm,
That was where barefoot, pregnant, and perfect were part of the white culture, no matter if you were what economic scale you were on.
mhm,
And I don't know how that plays across cultures, but I know that for me was the underpinning of what I had to let go of. I had to let go of dieting and then watch my body do whatever it did and love myself in that as we move through it. And now I'm at a reasonably normal weight, but not in my entire life. I was obese my entire life. So when people interact with me now and have their assumptions about normal weight women, privileged, whatever, it's like until you have lived in obesity as long as I did, your voice is it Brene Brown that says until you're in the ring,
mhm,
if the cheap seats don't matter and you are absolutely in the ring. Is there anything that I ask for resources or things that our listeners can do or read or experience? And my experience in this, I've just been in this racial equity space for a year, a little over a year, hard full time now, has just been to engage, not read,
mhm.
not learn, take off your academic hat and move with people and experience and listen, 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 uh, with the intention of being more than an ally, but to
Mhm.
actually advocate, to actually use your power for good.
That's a thing that I uh, try to make sure that I'm saying is that, what I'm doing on TikTok isn't really advocacy. It's the bare minimum. And I
Yes.
think that it's easy to think like, oh, now I'm being anti-racist. No, acknowledging the problem is the first step, right? Um, so I think it's really important to just look at your life and think, okay, how can I decolonize this? How can I get out of my bubble and be around people who are different from me? And that might mean volunteering somewhere, because especially if you've always lived in a situation where all your bills are always paid and so are the bills of the people around you. I think it's important to understand poverty when we're understanding systemic inequity. So look for physical opportunities. Like you said, we're quick to go for here's the book to read or things like that. But I think TikTok really is a valuable resource here, and hopefully we don't lose it in a couple weeks. But I I would encourage people to go follow some of the Black creators there who are talking about their experiences and racism, and just listen to the individual voices, not the academic voices, because we can talk theoretically about racism all day long, um, but you don't. It's it gets a lot easier to understand when you're hearing directly from people.
It is. Any parting thoughts? Anything you'd like to share that I haven't covered?
Oh, I just love your project, and thank you so much for inviting me to be on.
Thank you.
This is, do you have any advice for me?
Yeah. You are so authentic, and I'm always looking for behind the curtain because I can give and receive lectures all day long. But I went back to a Jesuit Catholic university over 50 years old after, I've got some religious decolonization to do.
Mhm.
And I remember so many of the things you're experiencing on a religious kind of a level, and fitting in and
Mm,
choosing not to, and finding it wasn't until year two of the master's program. And I guess here, if I have a tidbit for you, this is it. It
mhm.
wasn't until year two, when I was in a research project, that I looked around the room and went, oh my God, I get it. I do
Mm.
belong here.
Uh,
And I had a lifetime of experience behind me, and it was like that changed everything about me. That one thought in that library, in that moment, that said, I really do deserve this.
mm, that's lovely.
And I have great hope for you. With or
Thank you.
without TikTok, I will be following you and sharing your stuff. So I'm gonna